Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anurekha Chariwag, Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. I am coordinating the course on Sociology of India. Today we are going to discuss the module Tribes in India. This module has been written by Anandita Chakravarti, Research Scholar, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. In this module, we are going to discuss the issues of tribe in terms of its conceptualization as Adivasis. Further, we will also discuss the whole issue of identity, especially in terms of the relationship of the tribe with the mainland, the whole idea of exclusion of tribes, and the whole processes of Sanskritization, Hinduization, and also focus a little on tribal movements in India. Objective: the module seeks to analyze the tribal situation in India, throwing light on their existence from the time of colonial era. Further, evolution of their epistemology, tribal reservations, especially analyzing the politics involved in all these processes. The module aimed towards an in-depth study of the tribal situation in India through a critical analysis of literature on tribes in a vertical time frame from the colonial era to the 21st century. The module situates a debate on identity vis-a-vis the concepts of inclusion and exclusion within the larger issues on protective discrimination, and also brings out the complexities that exist and emanate when tribe is studied in the context of politics, state and law, religion and gender. Epistemology: tribes came to be conceptualized residually in terms of contrast with the general universal features of Indian society than the particular features that they were embodied. This is not to say that the particular features were overlooked, but they were not at the center stage of the conceptualization. For people at the grassroots level, however, it was not so much the common features, that is caste and religion, that mattered. Rather, it was language and culture, now referred to as ethnicity, which mattered the most and was hence the most pronounced marker of distinctiveness. Tribes in the regional context were invariably posited against the dominant regional community, which also happened to be a distinct linguistic or cultural community. This is evident from the fact that tribals are addressed by their ethnic tribe name, which is generally correspond with a distinct language or dialect. Yet this aspect of labeling tribals have been overlooked in the sociological discourse on tribes in the attempt to differentiate on the basis of general universalistic features, albeit in a limited sense. What was overlooked was the differentiation on the basis of which people themselves differentiated. The term scheduled tribes describes an administrative and legal category to confer certain constitutional privileges and protection to a group of people who are considered to be backward and disadvantaged. The politico-administrative category of scheduled tribe includes a relatively isolated and backward people. This term is of recent origin, coming into being with the birth of the Republican Constitution of India on January 26, 1950. Prior to that, the colonial administration identified the tribal people with variety of different names such as animist, tribal, animist, or people following tribal religion, hill and forest tribes, primitive tribes, backward tribes. There was also a debate in the Constituent Assembly on using the term ST. Jaipal Singh, the tribal representative in the Constituent Assembly, favoured the use of the term Adivasis instead of scheduled tribes, but the concept of scheduled tribes was unanimously accepted, and the reason given by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, chairman of the drafting committee of the Indian Constitution, was that the word Adivasi is really a general term which has no specific legal de jure connotation, whereas scheduled tribe has a fixed meaning because it enumerates the tribes. The term was used mainly to mark of identification and differentiation, that is to mark out a group of people in different physical features, language, religion, custom, social organization and so on. Overview: the scheduled tribes are also called Adivasis. They are also perceived as backward people who live in remote and isolated regions and engage in primitive occupations, animism and nomadic habits. The tribal groups are known to be the original inhabitants of the country prior to the coming and settlement of the Aryans in different parts of India. The Aryans considered the indigenous people primitive and forced them to move to isolated areas in the forest and mountains. In the context of Hindu civilization, the experiences of tribal population have been quite different from that of the scheduled caste population. While the latter was discriminated against and placed in the bottom rung of the social and cultural hierarchy by the Hindus, the tribal population by and large has been socially distanced and isolated by the Hindu society. The tribal family exhibit family, social and cultural values that are clearly different from the mainstream Hindu population. In general, the Adivasis are characterized by lack of hierarchical social and cultural practices and a non-acquisitive value system, absence of taboos in food and social practices, and a relatively high status of women in many communities. Each of the tribe has its own religion, culture and occupations and lifestyle, and they are dispersed all over the country. Thus, it is important to emphasize that tribal people do not constitute a homogeneous community. Empirical facts. According to the 2001 census, the ST population in India is 8.43 crore, which is about 8.2% of the total population. The population of the tribes had grown by 24.45% during the period 1991 to 2001. Except Haryana, Punjab, Delhi, Pondicherry, Chandigarh, all states and union territories have tribal populations. They are unevenly distributed in different states in India. More than half of the tribal people of India reside in the states of Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Gujarat. They are drawn from 701 communities, with many communities overlapping in more than one state. The number was 212 in 1950, 314 in 1967 and 427 in 1981. The largest numbers of STs are in the state of Orissa, where there are 62. Some of the large tribal communities are distributed over wide regions and often profess varied occupations. Tribal communities live in about 15% of the country's area and various ecological and geographical conditions ranging from plains and forests to hills and inaccessible areas. They belong to different racial stock, speak different languages of different families and show considerable variation in the basic economy. Tribal groups are at different stages of socio-economic and political development. Scheduled tribes and politics of evolution. The practice of discrimination and disadvantage led to the emergence of inclusion and exclusion of certain social groups in India. The politics of inclusion is a productive link, age of politics of recognition and redistribution. Within this framework, the periodic inclusion and exclusion of different groups from the ST category has emerged as one of the dominant facts of the Indian state. Amba Gudia identifies three approaches to the study of tribes in India, namely isolation, assimilation and integration. The British government realized that administration in a far-flung interior tribal areas would be difficult. It was further realized that the isolation would protect the tribal people against hostility and exploitation. The isolationist view of British policy reflects the compartmentalist approach to the problem of development of tribal areas and the tribal people prevalent among administration, which it found it easy to conceptualize clear distinction between different groups within society. Since very few people were allowed to visit the isolated areas, this policy led to extreme exploitation by non-tribal money lenders, contractors, zamindars and middlemen. Following in the footsteps of the colonial administration, the Indian state also practiced a modified version of isolation policy in the early period of independence. It is also evident that tribe is a colonial concept defined for the first time in the census of 1901 in contradiction to caste. The notion of tribe has evolved over the censuses from a hill and forest tribe to a primitive tribe to a backward tribe and finally to a scheduled tribe. A tribe is a larger concept comprising relatively isolated and backward communities. The scheduled tribes are the tribes scheduled under the Constitution of India and are marked by three states, namely isolation, awkwardness and cultural distinctiveness. The inclusion of tribes into the ranks of the scheduled tribes is an ongoing process, as evident from the successive list of the communities notified as a scheduled tribe. In order to accelerate the nation building process and maintain national independence, it was thought that the primordial ethnic identities must be replaced by the loyalty to the national mainstream, or at least made compatible with the national interest. Hence, they immediately started with assimilation policies in order to bring the scheduled tribes into national mainstream as a part of nation building process. Vidyarthi and Rai observed that in India, tribal people have been exposed to different Hindu and other communities and situations in different parts. The tribes are not perceived by the mainstream Hindus in the same way as scheduled caste population. The caste system that characterizes the Hindu culture is based on the existence of an hierarchical social class, barriers to entry in privileged occupations, notions of purity and dirt based on the individual social background. Scheduled caste population is often considered to be impure and unclean by the mainstream Hindus. Although the scheduled caste population has been discriminated against by the Hindus, the former have been integrated into a larger society and share some common customs and traditions with the Hindus. The scheduled tribes, on the other hand, are not regarded as unclean by upper caste Hindus, but they are marginalized and kept socially distanced from the mainstream population. They are also considered backward and primitive by mainstream population. The Indian epics Ramayana and Mahabharata portray the Adivasis as non-humans and often refer to them as Rakshasas, which is demons, Vanaras, which is monkeys, and Nagas as serpents. Protective discrimination. In regards to protective discrimination, Khaka points out that the groups identified as scheduled caste and scheduled tribes suffered from certain disabilities. The Constitution of India hence made provisions for their welfare and upliftment. All the same, the provisions were far from uniform for the two groups. Indeed, there are more provisions for the scheduled tribes than for the scheduled caste. The articles 15.4, 16.4, 19.5, 23, 46, 330 and many more are common to the two categories, and the articles 29, 164, 244, 244A, 275 1, 339 1, 339 2 pertain only to the scheduled tribe category. Besides, there are articles 371A, B and C which are in force only in certain states of the northeastern region, either in the whole state or part of it. The numerical strength that the scheduled caste enjoy over the scheduled tribes gives them an advantage over the latter in national politics. It is true that the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes do not constitute a homogeneous and cohesive social group both in the parliament and in state legislatures. They are fragmented along lines of political party and linguistic regional consideration. Though reservations have been provided for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, the filling up of these seats, especially in service and higher education, is not routine and mechanical in favor of the scheduled caste. The relative positions of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in availing the benefits provided by the government are to a great extent dependent upon two factors. One is the relative role of the two groups with respect to their general educational attainment, especially at the level of higher education. The other factor is their overall performances at these levels. Sanskritization and Hinduization. Sanskritization or Hinduization are the terms used by scholars to describe the social and cultural transformation experienced by tribal groups who are in close proximity to the mainstream Hindu population. Sanskritization is seen as a process whereby castes or tribes who are at the bottom of the social hierarchy imitate the practices and customs of the Hindus so that they can move up the social and caste hierarchy with the mainstream Hindu population. Among the tribal population, some groups such as the Bhils of Western India, the Rajgons of Central India have been assimilated, and some are recognized as members of the high social caste within the traditional Hindu society. Thus, there are some tribes who are partially Hinduized and are in close contact with mainstream Hindu population. Some scholars contend that many of the tribal groups who are in close proximity with the Hindu population suffer from moral depression. The depression originates from the fact that many of the tribes lost their land and were displaced from their original roots. Hence, the tribal groups feel that they have lost their identity without being accepted by the dominant culture. Some of the tribal groups have resisted merging with the dominant culture and have fought to maintain their own individualities and social cultures. It would be interesting to compare the social, economic and cultural trends of the tribal groups who have been in close contact with the Hindus and the scheduled caste population in their daily activities with those who are still isolated from the Hindus and form the vast majority of the population in the states. This would be the topic of a future study and would partially address the related to assimilation and isolationism. Issue of gender. Gender equality among tribal groups is a complex phenomenon that needs to be addressed in the context of various issues such as family structure, fertility, child mortality, literacy, sex ratio, labor force participation, economic worth generated within household, religion, culture, and exposure to the mainstream population. A few empirical studies that have focused on the multidimensional nature of gender inequality in India. While the effect of patriarchy on female autonomy and gender equality is seen as powerful variable, social indicators such as female literacy, child mortality also affect fertility and indirectly affect women's marriage age, female educational share and the social development. Recent studies show that many tribes, in an effort to conform to the mainstream Hindu social customs, have been reversing earlier trends of gender equality such as relatively high mean age of marriage for women, low fertility and higher participation of work for women. As Berryman remarked, the process of Sanskritization has been especially damaging to females because it encourages and enforces patrilineal early marriage, widow celibacy, dowry marriage, preferences for male child, low priority to female education and total economic, political and social dependence of females on males. Many scholars contend that there has been increase in child marriage among some tribes who have been in contact with the Hindu population. The growing contact with Hindu ideas is generally modifying the old principles, and the custom of marrying girls before they mature is steadily gaining ground. There has also been an increasing trend in early marriage practices among some tribes, thus contributing to higher fertility and higher infant mortality, as many of the young mothers are susceptible to complications and infections during childbirth. Roy contends that with Sanskritization, many tribes are discouraging widow remarriage and divorce among women. The sex ratio pattern among the tribal population that has generally been in stark contrast when the Hindu norm of favoring boys over girls is also changing among certain tribes who are demonstrating increasing preferences for boys. Finally, the work participation rate of the women among certain tribes is decreasing, as many women look down upon outdoor or menial work with contempt and show distinct preferences white-collar jobs that entail high status. The recent revival of many Hindu practices among tribal women is ascribed to the process of Sanskritization and Hinduization, as many tribes are conforming to the prevalent Hindu practices in order to be accepted and assimilated in the mainstream population. Tribal women also display considerable heterogeneity in terms of the role and status within the tribal community. The same tribe in different regions, significant differences in the fertility patterns, educational attainment, labor force participation, and other important variables. This may occur due to migration patterns, different environmental and ecological circumstances that force tribal women to change their modes of behavior and social customs. This can also occur due to the process of Sanskritization or Hinduization. Many studies show that in some of the northeastern region where the tribes constitute a majority in terms of total population, tribal women seem to fare better in terms of literacy rates, sex ratio, work patterns, and fertility rates. The evidence of gender discrimination in some tribal communities today may have occurred due to the assimilation of many tribal groups within mainstream Hindu culture and traditions. Further study is needed to focus on specific regions and tribes to find any meaningful pattern in the so-called process of assimilation with or isolation from Hindu mainstream traditions. Tribal movements. A tribal movement is a collective action of tribal society which is integrated through kinship and ethnicity and is disintegrated through these characteristics from non-tribal society. As such, a tribal movement represents a tribal society, its values, structure, linkages within and outside. There have been no organized movements of tribals in the very long pre-colonial period, though there are references to episodes involving conflict. The reason for these being abundance of resources such as forest and land a tribal could always fall back upon if he had to move out of his habitat. The tribal uprising and movements are essentially a colonial phenomenon. The colonial regime opened up tribal regions, exploitation, law and order, initiated the policy of intensive exploitation of tribal resources, including forest and land, and introduced cash-based market economy and brought in moneylenders, traders, peasants, government functionaries and others who joined in at the exploitation of tribal resources. These processes have been at work and the exploitation of the tribal resources has multiplied manifold in the post-colonial period. The post-colonial tribal movements have been generally divided into movements for autonomy of varying degrees, movement for social reform and cultural safeguard, and movements based on languages and scripts. In recent years, with the rise of international movement of indigenous people in the postmodernist phase, the focus has shifted to self-determination for self-management of the resources, identity and ethnicity. The environmental movement has focused on communities in situation to the relationship to resources, the rapport with nature and the worldview. Therefore, the growing concern with environment, particularly biodiversity, pluralism, ethnicity and identity, tribal movements are assuming new character. Share in power, structure, control over resources, self-management are the key elements of tribal movements today. Therefore, there is a growing demand for self-rule, for autonomy, for extensions of the 6th schedule to the middle of India. There have been a long and well-articulated demand for the separate state of Jharkhand, which has been sanctioned, and however the traditional types of movements have not entirely diminished, but some are alive and vibrant. Thus, the issues around which tribals organize may be related to the following areas, namely identity and preservation of cultural distinctiveness, autonomy and self-rule, self-engagement of resources, the conservation and resistance to displacement and gender question. Northeast, issues of exclusion and inclusion. As Sanjeev Barua points out, there is a disturbing relationship between conflicts over homeland that may often turn out to be violent and that of displacement. These conflicts not only between tribals but also between non-tribals. The discourse of homeland create in every territorial entity existing and potential groups that belong and those who do not. The agenda of these conflicts comprise the desire to protect an existing homeland against the homeland claims of a rival group, the project of a new homeland, or the fear that one ethnically defined. The agenda of these conflicts comprise a desire to protect an existing homeland against the homeland claims of a rival group, the project of a new homeland, or the fear that one ethnically defined group's homeland is or a part of it can be claimed by another. The aspirations for homeland are expressed in the 6th schedule language of autonomous district and in the newer language of statehood. Since the cosmetically federal regional order came into being, bringing an ethnically defined group scattered in many states into one homeland, maintaining a territorial integrity of a homeland that exists, creating a new homeland for a group that does not yet have one, are all part of this political discourse. Ethnicity is an important factor that influences complex social and political relations in the northeastern India. However, the various struggles for self-determination and events like the unprecedented protest against the extension of the Indo-Naga ceasefire in Manipur and Assam seem to lend credibility to politically expedient notions that dismiss ethnicity as reactionary, inward-looking and ultimately destructive element in democratic politics. Ethnicity is seen as a last bastion for veiled parochialism and insular chauvinism. For instance, one has seen the debate over the issue of a greater homeland for Naga people coincide with the competing legitimacy of other ethnic groups in the region that lay claim to the territorial integrity of the respective homelands. The long pending deliberations on how ethnic relations between communities develop, the language and politics of exclusion are overdue. At the core of this development or transformation of ethnic relations lies the fact that certain basic questions relating to socio-political rights of the indigenous people have not been resolved in the Northeast. With the transformation of ethnic relations and development of other conflicts, it has been easier to defer the fundamental contradictions that have come about as a result of the existing policies of the state in dealing with ethnic groups in the 7 states in the region, one ethnic group against the other in the district. Instead, by focusing on the internal and external changes, one hopes to arrive at the manner in which certain processes have affected social relations within the larger Dimasa community and by extension between the Dimasa and other ethnic groups in the region. Subjective factors such as years of communal distrust or contested histories may also add to this conflict. Yet it is at the level of administrative and official policy that one finds a greater lack of debate and accountability. Throwing light on tribal movements in the Northeast, K.S. Singh suggests that tribals are in an overwhelming majority and that the tribal system, both social and economic, is relatively secure. Tribal movements in this area have been essentially political and secular in nature. Tribal movements are entirely different from those elsewhere in the country in this area and stand in category by themselves because of its unique geopolitical situation and historical background. The region was also not completely integrated within the politico-economic system of colonialism. It remained relatively isolated from the cultural systems of the mainland and political upheavals of the freedom struggle. The entire system of non-regulation administration had its origin in the experiences of the tribal uprising of 1820s in the Arakan Hills. Considering the geopolitical factor, the relative isolation from the political system and the cultural influences from the mainland, the dominant form of the movement has been political, seeking goals ranging from autonomy to independence and relying on means ranging from constitutional agitation to armed insurgency. Religion among tribes. Religion constitutes an important parameter for studying tribes in the Indian context. To the colonial administrators come ethnographers, tribes came to be constituted as people who practiced animism or tribal religion. In such conceptualization, the colonial practices placed tribes as those outside the historical and textual religions and the social organization. The colonial tradition classified tribes as animists, a pointer that they belong to a religious tradition other than that of the major religion of India. The advocates of Hindutva, however, conveniently overlooked this fact and categorized them as Hindus. Chaube argued that Christianity had played a progressive and in fact integrative role in the Northeast India within the framework of regional autonomy. Since ancient times, Indian tribes have been assimilated into the Hindu society and caste system according to the political and economic strength. Beyond the northwest frontier, Islam did not penetrate the tribal societies in India. Only Lakshadweep came under the influence of Islam through contact with Arab traders. Contrary to that general impression, the advent of Christianity into tribal territories of India was late. The East India Company did not encourage missionary activities in British India. It was only after passing of the Charter Act of 1813 that they were forced to allow Christian missionaries in their territories. Initially, the Christian mission attempted proselytization of gentlemen and not the lower class people. They did not enter any tribal territory before administration. Their activities picked up only towards the end of the 19th century. The financial support of the government was directed officially at first towards the mission's education and welfare activities only. Some government officers detested missionaries for creating a class of literati that challenged the traditional tribal leadership and disturbed social harmony. Even in 1951, only 2 districts of India had Christian majority, the Lushai, Mizo and the Naga district in Assam. While Hindu is a society within which different religion, faith and modes of worship operate, Islam or Christianity is a religion within which different social structures operate. Hindvi is a geographical term first used by India's western neighbors and carried on into the early western writings about India. British census officials ignored the view and adopted caste as peculiar to the Hindu religion and decided to record them as tribal groups which has not been casteized. A pronounced spirit of secularism characterizes most of the post-colonial tribal movements centered on issues of ethnicity, identity, self-engagement of resources, languages and scripts. A careful scrutiny of the existing literature on tribal movements imply an endeavor to define one's own identity in relation to the others and to explore the mythical, historical, cultural linkages with other communities and with regional and pan-Indian traditions. The Bodos, for instance, describe themselves as Mahabharata people. Challenges. The categorization of tribes as Hindu leads to difficulties, both conceptual and empirical. To begin with, whether tribes are to be treated as Hindu or not is a debatable question. There are both similarities and differences in religious practices of the Hindus and the tribes. Secondly, if tribes are to be regarded as Hindus, then the whole historical process depicted by the historians to understand Indian civilization is open to contest and even rejection. The same would be the case with conceptual apparatus of Hinduization, acculturation, assimilation and absorption that has been developed to use to understand the dynamics of Indian society. In the days of competitive religious politics inaugurated in the 1920s, enrolling tribals into any of the major religious denominations, namely Christian and Hindu, available to the tribals, became a political task of the census staff, resulting in a steady decline in the number of followers of other religion and persuasions. For example, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, Jain and Muslim. Complexity of tribal identity. The dominant line of thinking in social science inquiries recognize the difference as hallmark of distinct tribal identity. However, the interaction of non-tribes poses the problem of coming to terms with difference. This interaction eventually leads to their absorption into the larger society. Identity politics among the tribes have generally been described as the politics of tribal identity, but such a description is a misnomer. Apparently, there is a rupture between the way tribal social consciousness is represented by the tribal people themselves and the way it is represented by scholars, administrators and others. The latter invariably define tribal identity as a means of describing these people. However, such articulation and expression of identity is not coterminous with the consciousness of the tribals. The tribals have no idea of the category of scheduled tribes or its Hindi or regional language counterparts. Such articulation are a part of legal and administrative practices. The articulation of a tribal identity is also related primarily to the state and the resources or the benefits it may make available. Hence, it emerges in more than one context of tribal people relations with the state, facilities of reservation, and other form of affirmative action. In the domain of social and cultural life, this does not enter as part of the consciousness. Hence, tribal consciousness is more a middle class consciousness than the consciousness of tribals at large. Tribal other. The correspondence between a negative ethnic identity and a marginalized social status is crucial for any interventionist strategy that seek to empower people to break out of the poverty trap. For tribals, this implies integration in the larger society, but not necessarily with the loss of the distinctiveness. The implementation of the government policies has not been adequate mainly because of the following reasons. Firstly, the very model of development adopted, that is top-down one that perpetuates unequal exchange relations between social groups and geographic areas and marginalizes the poor and powerless. The development debate in the last decade has resulted in effective critique of this model, though planners and politicians are slow to abandon it because of their own vested interest. For the tribes, the top-down interventions have been disastrous. Secondly, tribals have been long at disadvantage when outside world was intruded into their society, whether this was a colonial government or the national state. In many ways, clash of cultures, the development processes introduces often leaves them worse off than before. Stephen Fugge distinguishes various responses of the tribals to the critical situation in contemporary India. The one of rejection and regress into isolation will only leave them paradoxically condemned to total extinction. Only a few, if any, of the nomadic forest types would opt for this. By far the largest proportion of them is ready to change the tribal way of life and go along with the national mainstream. But they would not want to lose their tribal identity. What do they seem to want is integration and not assimilation. But there are also tribals who look for another alternative in the hope of saving their tribal identity and independence. These are generally from among the larger, more geographically concentrated tribes. Some of these movements are even sought to secede from the Indian nation, as in the northeast, and others have followed to express a solidarity in a tribal state within it, as in Jharkhand and Chota Nagpur. Conclusion. Despite being segregated, discriminated and oppressed, the scheduled castes are invariably considered as being of the Hindu society. And since Hindu society can effectively be understood at the regional level, the scheduled castes too are in effect the integral part of the regional community. This regional community is also divided into a linguistic community. Hence, although divided on the basis of caste, the scheduled castes share common language, culture, tradition of the linguistic community. They also constitute a part of the dominant nationality of the region. It is not so with the tribes, and that turns out to be one of the most serious challenges before the tribes. In fact, an average Indian is unable to figure where the tribe falls. The tribes are therefore invariably seen as outsiders, ones who not only do not speak their language but also do not share their customs, traditions and values. In this discussion, in this module on the tribe in India, we have come to understand the very notion of how tribe is conceptualized. We have also seen the differences in terms of the notion of tribe. Further, the very concept of the notion, definition of different groups defined as tribes itself is very, very contested. Further, we have also recognized about how the social movements play out very differently with regard to the tribes, especially in relation to whether they need to be integrated or assimilated into the mainland Hindu India. It is also important to understand that concept of tribe or the tribes have not been spread evenly across the country. It has been uneven, and therefore the integration into the community, especially that of the mainland Indian community, has also been very much fragmented. Thank you.